Good afternoon, everybody. We'd like to get started with our next session here at the RAA convention. It is my pleasure to introduce a guy that I've worked with at the FAA for a couple of years now. He's a really great guy and an extremely good professional and is very interested in what we have to do here at the Regional Airline Association. Mike Whitaker is the Deputy Administrator for the Federal Aviation Administration, and he's sworn into office by the U.S. DOT Secretary Ray LaHood on June 3rd in 2003. Mike is responsible for helping to ensure the safe and efficient operations of the largest airspace system in the entire world. This includes more than 50,000 daily operations, as well as enforcing safety standards for all the equipment and aerospace professionals within the aviation industry. Mike is also serving as Chief NextGen Officer and is responsible for the development and implementation of FAA's Next Generation Air Transportation System. Mike's a seasoned aviation executive with extensive business, regulatory, legal, and international experience. He's well versed in general and commercial aviation and has led collaborative efforts with joint ventures to promote aviation safety, enhance performance and profitability, fostered alliances, and improved corporate governance. In addition, Mike has a vast marketing and financial experience. Mike has served in numerous executive capacities for Interglobe Enterprises and also served roles at United Airlines and Trans World Airlines. Mike received a Bachelor of Administration from the University of Louisville and a Juris Doctorate from Georgetown University Law Center. With that, we'd like to welcome Deputy Administrator Mike Whitaker to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks, Chip. I want to start by congratulating you. I know SkyWest was named by Forbes as one of America's best employers, but also thanking you for all of your participation in what we do. You sit on the NAC, you're involved in Equip 2020, and you've been a really strong voice for regional aviation, so want to thank you for that. I'm glad to be here and join you in celebrating 40 years for RAA. And so this afternoon I want to talk a little bit about that last 40 years, how the industry has evolved, how safety has evolved during that time. Talk, of course, a little bit about NextGen, and we've even got a video which will look a little bit like an advertisement. And then we'll have some time for some questions at the end. So it occurred to me as I was preparing for this conference that the last 40 years for RAA is really the story of deregulation and all the changes that we've seen over the last 40 years during what has really been a tumultuous transition from a regulated to an unregulated or deregulated business. We've seen over that period of time really the invention of the hub and spoke system, and it's a system that has been very good for regionals. You're a huge part of that with over 50% of all airline flights now. My flight here this morning was on a regional. My flight home this afternoon is on a regional. Your service is essential for communities and for tying the spokes into the hub particularly. Since deregulation, we have seen really the invention of the low-cost carrier. It started here. It has spread everywhere in the world. But it was a new business model, and it has led to a complete transformation of the airline industry. Many, many more people fly now than we ever imagined. Load factors are higher than we ever imagined, and it has been a very disruptive factor for the airline industry over that really 40-year period. We've seen mergers, we've seen failures, we've seen reorganizations and bankruptcy, we've seen more mergers and more reorganizations and bankruptcy. It really has been a tumultuous period. For employees, it's been a difficult period historically. I started in this business with TWA, was there for 3.5 years and 1.5 bankruptcies. Then joined United Airlines at the height of its profitability with an exciting new business model called the ESOP, you may recall, which also led to a Chapter 11 filing. So A really tough time for airline employees as well. From a aviation regulator point of view, we've also seen hubs come and go. St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, even Cleveland, all hubs at one point that have been changed due to changes in the business model. So a really exciting period of growth, but a lot of turmoil as well. The last 4 decades have also seen a lot of progress in the area of aviation safety. We've seen extraordinary advances in how safe the industry has come, and we have done that by working together with you to make it safer. You'll recall that after a series of accidents in the 90s, we came together as an industry and managed to bring down the fatality rate for commercial aviation by 83% over a 10-year period, largely through the work of the CAST, the Commercial Aviation Safety Team. I mean, those are really astounding numbers, and if you look at how safe we become, there were no U.S. commercial fatalities last year. There were no commercial U.S. fatalities the year before. That represents 1.4 billion passengers traveling without a fatality. So really extraordinary numbers. In fact, if you have to go back over 6 years to find a U.S. commercial fatality in the United States. That success has also meant that we've had to look at safety in a different way. We have to look at risk in a different way. We went from a system that was largely a forensic system where you would have an accident, you would investigate the accident, you would make findings, and then you would make changes to the regulatory system to try to prevent those factors from occurring again. The good news is that we don't have accidents at nearly the rate that we did, but it means we've had to take a different approach to safety, and that has led us to what we refer to as a risk-based approach. And this is an approach that relies very heavily on data and the collection and analysis of data, and then finding risks among that data that we can then address to prevent the situation where risks line up and create an accident situation. That data comes from many sources. It comes from air traffic controllers, airway technicians, from the airlines, from commercial pilots, from GA pilots, mechanics, dispatchers, and a variety of sources. Through our ASIAS program, which I know you've heard about today and yesterday, we've collected more than 160,000 voluntary safety reports from commercial airline pilots, including pilots that fly at 19 of the RAA member airlines. That's 19 of 29 airlines, so we're encouraging all of you to participate in this very important process. Your data supports our ability to identify underlying contributing factors that give rise to accidents. And just to give a couple of examples, we have learned a lot more about factors that contribute to runway excursions. We have learned a lot more about loss of control in flight and how pilots lose situational awareness in the cockpit. We have put together ways of mitigating some of these factors, working together with industry to develop new safety enhancements, including in the areas of flight crew training, aircraft equipment, and operational procedures. We have an air carrier training arc, which I think you've heard about as well today, and we're looking at other voluntary initiatives to try to improve training. But we can't make these improvements without your data. We ask you to continue to be committed to this program, and if you're not participating, we would ask you to look at joining up into that program. But risk-based decision-making is not the only place that we get safety regulation. I mentioned that the last accident was over 6 years ago. This, of course, was the Colgan accident in Buffalo that I know you're very familiar with. It brought a lot of attention to the regional business. Immediately following that accident, Congress enacted the Airline Safety and FAA Extension Act of 2010, designed to address safety in several specific areas. One area, of course, is that law contained a self-enacting provision that required all first officers to have an ATP certificate. And that means 1,500 hours of training. And just to be clear, it is a law that came from Congress. It's not an FAA rule, and we don't have the ability by rule to change something that Congress does. Our role in this was we were given the ability to enact a rule to relieve some of the 1,500-hour requirements by giving credit for structured academic and military training so that that standard can take into account that training in meeting the 1,500 hours. I know this is an important issue for RAA, and I know there's been a lot of discussion here at this conference. We remain open to having conversations around that. I mentioned the training arc that's in existence now. That is one place that we can look at alternative education, training and experience, and ways to qualify for an ATP certificate, and we look forward to getting recommendations out of that arc. In response to another congressional direction, the FAA also enacted a rule to address pilot fatigue. We've used fatigue studies to help us update the flight and duty rules in a way that helps ensure that flight crews arrive rested and ready to fly. This work continues. RAA has been involved in this, along with Air Wisconsin and Washington State University, in completing a flight simulator study on pilot fatigue in multi-engine operations. The study compared the alertness of pilots completing duty days with multiple takeoffs and landings versus duty days of the same duration but with a single takeoff and landing. This research will help us, again, understand some of the ramifications of fatigue in flight operations. The Colgan accident also, along with other accidents and incidents in recent years, has highlighted the need to ensure that pilots have adequate experience in recognizing stalls and reinforce their ability to recover from stalls. New rules will require air carriers to implement training by 2018 to address recognition, prevention, and recovery from full stalls. To complement this requirement, we're looking at what rule changes should be made with regard to flight simulators. Current rules for simulators require the pilots to be trained and evaluated up to the stall warning, but not up to the full stall. So we're proposing improvements to simulator models so they can be used to train pilots to recover from a full stall. These changes will enable us to mitigate some of these incidences that we've identified in the cockpit involving stalls. So safety is always our first mission, but as Deputy Administrator, one of my statutory roles is to serve as the agency's Chief NextGen Officer. So I'd like to talk a little bit about where we are with NextGen. I'm proud to say that over the last year we've completed a couple of very important milestones in NextGen and keeping NextGen on track. In March of this year, we finalized the deployment of all of the automation upgrades in the 20 en route high altitude air traffic control centers across the country, which means we've been able to retire the legacy system. We replaced all of the screens, hardware, software, procedures, and training throughout the entire system. So this is a very significant upgrade to our technology. With ERAM, the system's known as ERAM, and with this in place, we're able to cover almost twice as many inputs as per screen, and we can automatically hand off flight plans and data between systems, and it gives us much greater flexibility operating going forward. We've got a brief video that we want to just show talking about ERAM. If we can roll that, please.
The FAA has completed the foundational system that gives controllers greater vision across the 20 en route centers, enhancing safety in what is already the world's safest aviation system. The En route Automation Modernization, or ERAM, is the future of air traffic control. By replacing a series of single sites with a networked and integrated system, controllers have greater vision across the airspace, truly managing flights from gate to gate. ERAM is built with the technological capacity to support current and future next-gen capabilities. This revolutionary system is the foundation of our modernization and enables and influences every phase of flight. While passengers are boarding the aircraft, flight plan information is being processed and digital clearances are being sent directly to the flight deck, which expedites departures. This new digital communication system also allows for nearly instantaneous reroutes for weather while an aircraft is rolling toward departure. The new satellite surveillance system that succeeds radar now offers air traffic controllers unprecedented clarity and precision in moving aircraft. Now, with this new vision, buffers can be removed and create more efficient departures that save time, fuel, and reduce emissions. With all en route centers connected, flights can be managed from gate to gate. Air traffic controllers can monitor traffic across the U.S. and make small course and speed corrections to ensure that aircraft flow into the airspace. Using these key merging and spacing tools ensures aircraft flow evenly in and out of the airspace and are able to connect with time-based arrival windows that allow the aircraft to make a smooth, near-idle descent into the airport. That translates into more fuel-efficient, on-time arrivals and less circling of the airport. Once on the ground, new systems allow air traffic controllers and airline operations centers real-time vision into the movement of aircraft from 35 major airports. Controllers use this information to manage the flow of aircraft, and airlines are using it to monitor for connections, tarmac operations, and crew hours. More efficient movement on the ground means quicker taxi times and a better experience for the traveling public. ERAM is the foundation of the FAA's modernization effort, and it is complete and providing benefits in every phase of flight today. When we work together to solve the challenges of traffic and congestion in our busy airspace, we can save fuel, reduce carbon emissions, and increase on-time arrivals and departures. Partnering with the aviation industry, the FAA and NextGen are creating a healthy and sustainable national airspace system.
So in addition to ERAM, last fall we completed the installation of all of the ground stations for the ADS-B network throughout the United States. And ERAM was necessary to take the feed from the ADS-B system, and the ERAM can take that ADS-B feed and fuse it with radar, so we get a much greater clarity and accuracy in controlling traffic, which allows a more efficient separation standard and also gives us much better coverage than radar, particularly in mountainous areas. So between ERAM and ADS-B, we've really completed two of the major foundational pieces of NextGen, and that will allow us to move into a phase of NextGen where we're able to provide more benefits to users in the system. The main place that we do that, the main way that we focus on benefits to the system is through the NextGen Advisory Committee, and over the last year we have worked with Chip and a number of his colleagues from airlines and industry to agree on 4 areas of focus for NextGen benefits, and these include PBN, performance-based navigation, improving surface operations, implementing datacom, and making multiple runway operations more efficient. We agreed as a group on these 4 priorities, and we've agreed to milestones and locations for these priorities, and we're executing those. We're about 6 months into that program, and that gives us a focus over the next 3 years for delivering on those benefits. As an example, the FAA's Metroplex program, we have rolled out numerous new procedures in Houston, North Texas, and in the Washington, D.C. area. Just in Houston, for example, we put in 60 new performance-based procedures that have shown already an annual savings rate of $6 million from reduced fuel consumption. We also are rolling out multiple runway operations, improvements in Atlanta, Louisville, Cincinnati, Houston, Charlotte, and New York. Atlanta is a good example of how that's been successful. It has allowed an increase in capacity of 5%, which is about 5 more operations per hour. So it's had a huge impact on the efficiency of operations in Atlanta. Delta Airlines has seen a savings of 2 minutes per taxi time, which when you add up the operations of a hub is significant, and looks to be a savings of between $13 and $18 million a year. So pretty significant impact there. One area of NextGen that I think is particularly of relevance for regionals is the Wide Area Augmentation System, or WAAS as it's commonly known, which allows us to fine-tune the GPS signal. WAAS allows us to build procedures into airports, particularly small airports where you don't need to have a significant amount of ground equipment in place. It is a much less expensive way of building in these precise procedures that allow you to land in low visibility and other weather conditions. So with the ADSB ground stations installed, with ERAM complete, we're looking forward to the next big milestone for NextGen, which is ADSB out equipage by 2020. And as I'm sure you all know, this mandatory rule was put in place in 2010. It was designed to give industry and users of the NAS 10 full years to reach compliance. That 2020 date is firm. It will not be extended. And we have been working very diligently with industry to make sure that we can all meet that date. We hosted an industry call to action in October last year with over 100 participants from industry to brainstorm what are the obstacles, what are the hindrances, what are the issues around ADSB equipage that we need to work on. From that, we formed a series of working groups that we call Equip 2020 to identify those barriers and work through solutions. And I think by all measures, it's been very, very successful in making some really significant progress to make sure we're on track for equipage. I have met with all the major carriers and have seen their plans, and they have all confirmed their intent to equip by 2020. General Aviation had some significant concerns about cost for equipage, but just in the last 6 months, we've seen the cost be reduced by over 50% for equipage. There are now a number of ADSB out solutions for well under $2,000 available for general aviation. So we've already seen a pretty significant uptick in equipage for aviation. So we worked with different sectors. RAA has been part of the Equip 2020 group. And I know for some of the regionals, we have pretty clear visibility on their roadmap to equipage. If you're not on that list of carriers with a clear roadmap for equipage, we recommend that you work on that, and we are happy to engage with you in any way we need to through Equip 2020 to make sure we're focused on getting everybody equipped by 2020. That is a key milestone for NextGen and a date that we have to hit. So with that, let me just close by thanking you for your participation here in this conference. This is one of the forums where we can engage on important issues around safety and about NextGen. And I want to specifically thank RAA for their participation with the CAST work on the various rulemaking committees that we're engaged in, work on the NAC, and especially the safety reporting through ASIAS. We're committed to continuing to work with you and other stakeholders in all these areas to make sure we can move forward with NextGen deployment in a safe and efficient manner. So with that, Chip, I'm happy to open up for questions and talk about whatever's on folks' mind.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Any questions from the crowd? I got a mic here. Any from the crowd at all? Or I could just take this mic and stick it in front of you and see if you have a question. Maybe, well, people might be thinking, Mike, could you probably tell us a little bit about some of the success in the Houston Metroplex area, about what some of this stuff has done? That'd be great.
One of the features of the Metroplex is improving the efficiency of course departures and arrivals. The optimized profile descent is one that we talk about a lot, where carriers are able to reduce power 75 or even 100 miles out and have a significant reduction of fuel burn, not have the interim level offs coming into the Metroplex area. In Houston and North Texas, both of those were very successful overnight changeovers to procedures Going forward, we're doing it more on an iterative basis, but the fuel savings are the thing that gets the most attention, but there's also a significant reduction in noise for the community. So it's really been a very successful program.
Very good. Maybe one other thing that would be good to address. We obviously operate smaller aircraft, and I think that there is maybe some concern from smaller aircraft operators when we get into a full next-gen scenario. Wake turbulence is something that is a concern for all of us on the safety. What's the FAA's view as far as making sure that those things are mitigated through either the air traffic controllers, that we don't get too close behind too heavy of equipment or any of that type of stuff? What's your take on that?
Well, with separation standards, I think, as we know, separation standards have been around for a long time, and they really were driven by the radar system and the lack of precision within radar. So as we move to ADS-B and have much greater resolution and refresh rates, we are able to look at reducing separation, and the radar is no longer the long pole in the tent. So we start getting more focused on wake separation and recategorization. We also have the ability now to get much more precise on wake separation standards, but there are obviously very significant safety issues associated with that. But with the new technology, we get a lot more information about aircraft size in the flow pattern, so we can work that through that process. But it gets a lot of attention on the safety case up front.
Good. Yes, in the very back. I'll bring the mic to you.
Yes, Aaron Karp with Air Transport World. What's your view on some of the proposals out there to separate ATC from FAA? And I know you probably can't take a position on a given proposal, but one of the justifications for doing so is the notion that FAA is currently constituted isn't in a position to implement NextGen. Do you think FAA, as it's constituted, can implement NextGen in a timely fashion?
Well, I'll certainly start with that second part of your question. I think if you look over the last several years, the execution record has been very solid for NextGen. The ERAM program that we referred to was a program that got behind schedule about 6 or 7 years ago, and it was re-baselined in 2010. So for the last 5 years, that program has been on schedule and on budget. ADS-B finished on time and on schedule. The early phases of NextGen were very focused on this change out of the technology, changing out all of the computers and software and training in all of the en route centers, the TRACONs, which we're still in the process of doing, the towers, and then switching to ADS-B. It's a huge infrastructure project that fortunately we're toward the end of now. So NextGen is moving into a phase where we're able to look at delivering benefits. But it has been on time and on schedule and on budget over the past several years. So I think there is a pretty solid record there. Having said that, there are those who are advocating separation, and part of their claim has to be that some factors aren't working, and so we've had to do some fact correction in that space. As far as reauthorization proposals, there have not been any specific proposals put forward, so it's difficult to react to a proposal without something actually being on the table. We have made it very clear that we think the conversation really needs to be focused on what are the problems that we're trying to solve for. And from our perspective, that has really been around funding. With sequestration, with the government shutdown, where we are on funding is dramatically different than where we thought we would be just 3 years ago. And when you're talking about capital programs and multi-year expenditures on some of these programs, it's very difficult to plan and execute when you have such wild fluctuations in the funding level. So our focus has been to redirect the conversation to what issue are you trying to solve for, and we think that is really stability of funding and adequacy of funding. Other than that, what we have said is that we want to be part of the conversation. We've made a lot of data available to people who are analyzing what it would look like to separate air traffic from the rest of FAA. And we want to remain part of that conversation, and as proposals get put forth, we will be part of that conversation.
Thank you. Any other questions for Michael? Michael, I have one more, just real quick, maybe in closing. My involvement with NextGen is I think that there's a lot of work that we need to do as regional airlines. You have a complex responsibility to look at everybody who uses the system. If you could maybe close with one final take on the regional space and what we need to do to up either the equipage or what we need to be most cognizant of, maybe just with some closing thoughts on that from a regional perspective.
Yeah, I think, we've looked at the industry as we looked at the equipage issue, segment by segment by segment. We have working groups that just focus on issues related to regionals. Some of the issues are similar to issues that the majors face, because majors have a lot of different types of equipment. Some have solutions by the manufacturers, some have third-party solutions. Getting to equipage has really been a lot of rolling up your sleeve and just plowing through the technical issues. What we have found is that as we've engaged with carriers, airlines, military, general aviation, one thing that we hear throughout is it's really important to drive home the point that date's not going to change. It's not going to slip. An airline doesn't want to make that expenditure to equip by 2020 if it turns out that others aren't equipping and the benefits won't show up until later. So we've been very clear about articulating that date is not going to change. And as we've gotten more and more groups committed to equipage, we have more folks behind the idea of not having that date change. So I think the message would be twofold. One, the date's not changing, and two, Equip 2020 really is a good resource if you haven't yet done the planning necessary to figure out what your pathway is to equipage. A lot of good resources are available there.
Perfect. Thank you again, Michael, for the trip to our convention here. Maybe we can give one more round of applause for Michael. Thanks,
everybody.